terrific opportunity to get into this house. I've looked at a lot of the architecture in this area, but this one is always really difficult to get access to. And we've been here for half an hour just talking about the amazing sense of serenity, which of course now we've destroyed. But I'd also like to introduce Ron Sane, the architect. So I'll just briefly introduce Ron, and then we'll just have a bit of a conversation about the design of the house. And Ron was born in Fiji and went to high school there, came to New Zealand, did a year to get UE at St. Peter's, and then went through architecture school in a particularly good year for New Zealand architects, because in your year group there was you, David Mitchell, Athfield.
A lot of brilliant students.
Yeah. And who was the other? Oh, Mixon.
Claude Mixon.
Yeah.
John Sinclair.
Yeah, so particularly good year for architects.
Yeah.
And then after that, Ron went and worked for Lou Walker for 6 years or so. And then after a conversation with Lou, there wasn't much chance of promotion there. But then there was a job advertisement at Mark Brown Fairhead. And you had quite a good job interview.
Well, I'm not quite sure whether you guys have heard of the firm Mark Brown Fairhead. They were in the 60s. They were, in my opinion, one of the better firms. So as a student, I used to look up to them, and people like Miles Warren's office, everybody wanted to work for those firms. So when I found that Lewis Walker and Co., where I was working for 6 years, and I brought quite a lot of work into that firm, I asked the boss, Lewis Walker, we called him Mr. Walker in those days. After 6 years, I still call him Mr. Walker. I asked him whether there was any potential, and he immediately said no. So I left. I thought after 6 years and doing a lot of work in, if there's no potential for me, why would I want to be a worker all my life instead of being self-employed? So I left there, and about a year later, I saw an advertisement from Mark Brown and Fairhead, one of my heroes in those days. So I went to see them for a job. They were looking for a young designer. They were like 10 years older than me at the time. So naturally, in the end, I got the job as a designer for the firm, and I've stayed there, I don't know how many, probably 30 years, almost 30 years.
And there was something about the work that they did. They did the All Walker House, which is in the neighbourhood and just over the hill, the house we call the House for the Subtropics, as it was, and the kind of houses they were.
Well, I related to what they were doing, and that interests me because it was my idea of what residential architecture should be. And it was very much like Richard Neutra sort of style, post and beam, and also flat roofs. And the other architect that really interested me was Harry Seidler of Australia. I love that kind of clean line architecture. So we got on famously together as a partnership. Yeah.
And there's a photo of, there was an architectural convention in Auckland, and Mark Brown Fairhead built a little sort of flat roof pavilion type house within the town hall itself.
That's right, yeah.
And there's a photo of them with that and Harry Seidler.
That's right.
Who was giving the keynote. Yeah,
well, Harry was my hero for many, many years. Sadly, he passed away fairly recently,
And with the California show at the Art Gallery, there's going to be a series of talks there, because when I went through the school in the late 70s, early 80s, it was still the group, Vernon Brown, etc. Yeah. And we didn't really know about Mark Brown Fairhead, Rigby Mullen, all the other people doing that kind of architecture, more of an international style than the kind of regional modernism.
Yeah, most people in the early days did the group kind of architecture with pitched roofs. It was a group of us, like Adams and Dodd, or one of those firms that did flat roofs. So we just pursued our kind of architecture, and there was always enough clients for all of us.
And how did you get the job at the Brake House?
Oh, this is Brian Brake. I didn't know him from Rivara Soap, but he came to Auckland with a friend of mine called Guy Nan. Guy Nan is a well-known Chinese sculptor. 1974, they came to see me, and Brian and his partner Raymond lived in Hong Kong for many years, like 20 years, and they had a house designed for this site. Brian owned this piece of land for quite a long time, and he was particularly interested in Japanese style architecture, so he had a design already done, a typical Japanese farmhouse, pitch roof like this, and big wooden like tree trunks for beams and so on. Really rustic. So when I came here and looked at the site, I said, God, the Japanese house down the valley wouldn't be very exciting because all you see from up there would be just the roof. So I suggested to Brian that maybe we should look at an alternative to this house. Japanese farmhouse is okay on a flat piece of land, but not on the steep terrain like this. So I asked him for the weekend to give us an opportunity to show them what we think he should build here. At that time, 74, Simon Carnham, straight out of university as a graduate student, we took him in as a partner at those days because we wanted somebody young and upcoming. So we picked Simon from the school. Just elaborate a little bit. To get Simon, I had to ask Claude Mixon, because Claude Mixon was a teacher at that time. So we went to Claude and said, which one is your brightest student? And he mentioned Simon. Because Simon at that time was doing funny houses. You know, seat pitch with round windows and all that kind of, we call them naughty houses, you know? So we took him on because of his imagination, right? So he came right at that time when Brian Brake came to see me. So Simon and I got together and we did a quick design on this site. And it's not dissimilar to this in kind of concept. 2 blocks, living, bedroom, and a bridge in between. And he loved it, Brian Brake loved it. And straight away he forgot about the Japanese farmhouse and told us to do this. So that's how it came by. Just from a very simple concept design.
And he was based in Hong Kong. Seriously, he
Yes.
was a famous photographer.
Yeah.
He was based in Hong Kong at the time. You were sending the mechanics
Well,
of.
it's not like today when you can email somebody and get them on Skype and so on. In those days, there was nothing, not even fax machine. We had to write letters and telephone calls, you know. So it took us a long time, almost a year, to finish the design because he was such a fussy guy. He had so much furniture, and each one had a special place. He would bring this little cutout of couches and various things, and we would place it on a piece of on a site plan to make sure that everything had a home. And that took something like 26 goes at that sketch plan to get it right. But once we got it right, once he knew where everything was going, there was no problem. We just get ahead, went and did the job.
And the more well, some of us have noticed the lack of handrails and various kind of safety and health issues,
True.
etc. But there's also very much pre-leaky building times. You built a pool on the roof, so.
Yeah, from up the road when you look down, I didn't want to see full of leaves on a dirty roof. So we put a bright idea. We'll tank the roof and put maybe, I think it was 75 ml of water. So we used butanol roof and it worked very well because every time you come here you see the reflection of all the pungas and things. It looks stunning. The only trouble is that you have to clean that roof. After about 3 weeks it starts to get slimy, and so we'd go up there with a broom and wash it out. But after doing that for a year, it became a bit tiring. So then we start to get rid of the water.
In terms of structure as well, there's a lot more steel in the building than I
Yes.
really thought.
Yeah.
And you'd done the Sergeant House a few years before. There was a great deal of concrete.
There's a concrete house, yeah. Well, to get big spans, of course, you have to use big lumps of steel, like to do this to that tatami room there, and this deck here, you'll notice that there's a central pole. The whole thing comes out of steel beams from way back there, that cantilevers up there. So to get, it looks simple, but it wasn't underneath. There's a lot of steel in it. Yeah.
And the house has been through a few changes as well over the years. Do you want to just comment on those?
Yeah,
So,
I think Alan, who owns it now, must be you must be the third or the fourth?
Fourth owner.
But the fourth owners, yeah. The first couple was a Japanese couple that bought it, but they didn't live here. They live in Japan, and they had housekeepers stay here. And the housekeeper had a couple of little kids, so the place got really wrecked. But I think Alan and the previous owners have really done wonders for it. They repolished the floor and redesigned the kitchen. So the house is looking really very, very good. It's 36 years old. You know, it's a long time ago.
and just in terms of the alterations, there's a hole that was punched between the kitchen and the dining area. And
Yeah, when Brian Brake was here as a client, he didn't want to see into the kitchen. He's a good cook, but he didn't want people to see the kitchen, and he needed the walls for his art. He had a lot of art. So we built the kitchen, which looked into nothing because it's quite a dark kitchen. But one of the previous owners decided to put a hole in the wall, and I think it's a brilliant idea. From the kitchen now, you can see the dining room, you can see the view, and the kitchen's a lot brighter for that. So some things happen, and it's all the good. They've redone all the bathrooms, for example.
Because the thing that strikes me is it's not your 3-bedroom house, so it was very much a base for his business. So downstairs he had almost like kind of a cinema.
Yeah.
So,
Brian Brake, being a photographer, he does documentaries. So downstairs we prepared a studio for him, which is fitted out with projectors and so on, doing videos. Beautifully done downstairs. It's very professional. Everything is automated. He would go behind the projection room, looking through the glass. He could see who was in the room, and he would press a button, and all the curtains would come down. And they press another button, the projection screen would come down, and the music background would come. Really beautifully done. And that's his style, isn't it? Professional.
So I guess we'll let people have a look around. Is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah. Now that I come here, remember this was a flat tower on the ceiling, flat all the way, including here, it was flat all the way to the kitchen. But during construction, when we had the walls framed up to ceiling height, I was here one day and I looked up there and I saw this beautiful tree. It was autumn colours, and I thought, wow, why don't we take advantage of that? So we, at the last minute, we kicked the roof up 45 degrees to get that, and I think that's a big improvement. That's one of the things you do when you visit a site. You see things that you don't see in the drawing book, and I think this is a big plus.
Yeah. And I'm lucky enough to have a copy of the drawings that you gave me years ago with the different handwriting, which we can sort of track all the changes through the various sets of drawings.
True. I mean, there weren't that many sheets of drawing for a house. Today, if you did, it'd be 100 sheets of drawing. But at that time, maybe 20 for a big house, including all the fittings. So we didn't need a lot of drawing. They're not as fussy as they are today. Now, lots of things wouldn't comply if we did this today. Mainly the handrail. Can you imagine coming across that bridge to the entrance? You've had handrails on both sides, right? Can you imagine this beautiful deck with a metre high handrail around it, right? You'll totally destroy the stairs down to the basement when you go down. Just be careful. Very dangerous. It's got no side, you can fall through the side. But then we were designing for grown-ups. We have no children, so we didn't worry too much about that. But today you can never do this again.
And on that note as well, we'll let people have a look around. Are there any questions for Ron?
Well, I think when you walk around, you'll see things that if we can answer questions, just approach me. All right?
Yeah. Bill, I'm just going to make a pitch. You'll notice some photographs that are here today. Michael Engel is going to get embarrassed now as a photographer with a large camera. Michael's been doing a book project on the house, and this is just some examples of his work. And we couldn't miss the opportunity of introducing a great photographer in a photographer's house to a bunch of architects who, of course, you're going to want him to work on your projects in the future.
Michael, come on here, Michael. He's one of the greatest photographers we have. More than that, he's an architect. Became a photographer. So Michael and I are considering doing a book on this house only. So these are some of the photographs Michael has taken. So if you want something done on your projects, get a card of Michael. All right?
And just as we have a look around, we're just going to limit the number of people coming out here because there is a
work in progress.
So there's, with no disrespect to the architects, the quality of the timber or something, it's a bit wobbly here, so we might just have half a dozen people out.
Please go to the deck because that's the most exciting thing of the house, sitting up there with the nature around you.
Just don't all go there.
The
main deck itself is fine. The main deck itself is fine. It's just that there's a bit that's dropped just before the step, so just step over that.
But I'm there, it's perfect mistake. All right?
Okay, thank you. We'll have a look around, and I think, Alistair, how long have we got here?
Till 3.
Till 3. And Ron is happy. Ron will be here, and he's happy if you want to talk to him about anything. And can we just we'll thank Alan, the owner, very much for allowing us in here.